Hello, I'm Kathy Bissell. Welcome to the Golf Show 2.0. I'm here with my co-host Gary Van Sickle, who has procured for us a fascinating guest, Nicholas Callaway, who's the son of Ely Callaway. Gary, why don't you start with the first question?
Well, I don't want to insult everybody else who's going to write a golf book in 2025, but I can pretty much guarantee this is going to be the golf book of the year. The unconquerable game. Nicholas Callaway and Andrew Moorhead put it together. It's been an ordeal piecing it together. And it's written first person as in Ely's voice. And there's also an AI audio edition, which is spooky good. It sounds like, it's Ely talking. I don't know how they did it, but we'll get to that. But Nicholas, this has been a 30 years in the making, 20 years specifically for you. Tell us how this book came to be and why the world needs to hear about your dad.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Kathy. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Indeed, this is a 30-year project. I am a publisher, a media company, and toward the end of Ely's life, in the 1990s, I, of course, had grown up with him, and he had a fascinating and amazing life that traversed 8 decades of the 20th century. I convinced him that he should write a book. He worked with several different writers, including John Rothschild, Bud Shrake, ultimately with Larry Dorman, then the head golf writer for the New York Times, and this book would not have existed without Larry. But Ely passed away in 2001 with the book unfinished, like a giant box, a jigsaw puzzle of unassembled pieces. And it sat there for a generation. And during COVID, I, with Diana Duvall, who was Ely's last assistant, we said, his story is important, valid, and most of all, relevant to today because he had an extraordinary ability to see ahead. And so we felt that it would be important for our world today to hear him in his own voice, in his own words, a generation after he passed. And so that is the book that is coming on March 25th.
Which is a great picture.
My Life in Golf and Business. It is equally addressed to the worldwide business audience, whether you're a garage startup entrepreneur, a Fortune 50 executive of a global company, and of course it's addressed to the worldwide golf audience. That's 50 million people. So we're in the run-up to the launch on March 25th, and it's going to be a phenomenon. Ely is back.
Incredible. Well, I think
won't let us alone.
there's a million stories in the Naked City, as they say, and in this book, but I can't get past. There's two I can't get past. One is your first, when your dad told you the name of the club and your first swing with it. That just go over that incident once again. It's beautiful.
Sure. Well, I had one of the things that people don't know is that he started Callaway Golf at the age of 63 in 1982 after 2 other careers. But what people don't know is that he had already brought 60 years of playing the game as a fine amateur. It was his lifelong passion. In the course of doing the book, we also found in his archives, in fact, this is a picture of the first day Ely Callaway swung a golf club in 1922 at the age of 3. So, in other words, the roots ran deep, and I had the pleasure of a lifetime of playing with him before he went into the golf club business. And when he did, of course, he was so excited about everything that he did that it was always the greatest thing there ever was, the greatest wine, the greatest textiles. So when he told us that he was going into the golf club business with these hickory stick USAs. We were a little skeptical. He thought he thought it was the greatest thing since the sliced bread. Kathy, you actually have those early clubs, which is amazing. So I had a lifetime of going and playing golf with him, and in 1990, I was visiting him in California. He lived near Rancho Santa Fe at Rancho Valencia. He played at Del Mar, and he always had a big tour bag filled with the prototypes of his clubs. And we thought it was all very nice. It was a little company, and it was a nice retirement occupation for him. And so he says he kept a towel over the bag to hide the prototypes. And he pulled it out, and he said, Nicky, you see this club? This is going to be the biggest selling golf club in the world, and it's going to change the game of golf. And he was a little bit, he was very enthusiastic. A trait I and he said,
"That's a salesman."
And he said, and I've given it a name. I want to try it out on you. Tell me what you think. And he loved to play with words, with names. So I had always heard him, naming products and the wines, the Sweet Nancy and everything else. And I said, lay it on me. And he said, I'm going to call it the Big Bertha. And I said, I think that's the worst name for a product I've ever heard. And I think you're going to have a problem with women golfers. And he said, well, Nicky, you're wrong. And let me tell you why you're wrong. He said, first of all, it has a great story. And then he told the story of the World War I cannon that could shoot a cannonball farther than anything else. He said so. And he said, but remember, the product makes the name doesn't make the product. Which is really a profound insight. If you think about things at a certain point, if a product becomes so famous or so beloved, the name takes on its own life. Kleenex. Yeah.
It's like when somebody designs a weird-looking putter. It's a huge disadvantage at first, but if it hits, it becomes a huge advantage because it's instantly recognizable.
Exactly. So
and then your first shot with it was unforgettable.
Well, he and I said my response after his selling that it was a great name. I said, I still think it's the worst name for a product I've ever heard. I'm sorry. And he said, well, why don't you try it out and then tell me what you think? So I stepped up and dressed the ball. I took a swing. On impact, of course, there was that weird, funny, metallic sound that we had never heard before. But I watched I looked down, the ball had dribbled a couple of feet. The club head had flown off the shaft and it had flown farther than the ball, about 30 yards. And he said, we got a few gluing problems, but we're going to fix them, and I guarantee you it's going to be the biggest selling club in the world. It's going to change the name.
It might have been.
And he was right on all counts.
He was right a lot.
That was usually being with Ely, he always had a story. Everything was a story, and that's how he opens the book. He says the first words, and I can't do his accent, but he said, as long as you've got a good story, you can convince anybody of almost anything. That in itself is profound. So
That's what his life was like, I'm sure.
that's what his life was like. So
It's interesting that, you know, he was grew up in a family that was already in the textile industry, so he certainly would have some expertise. He worked there, but to go into wine and then to golf, which he didn't have that kind of expertise, and he was immensely successful. I know with the wine, his wine was used at a ceremony in New York when Queen Elizabeth II visited.
American Bicentennial celebration.
Yes, and
Yeah.
you know, and the big story was she was served the wine and she asked for a second glass. Now,
That's right.
I don't know much about the Queen. She might have had second glass of any rot gut, but still, nonetheless, that was an endorsement. You can't beat that. And this is the guy who, the textile guy, he got in the wine business, and the Queen liked his wine. You can't. He was successful at everything he did.
Well,
I think he was.
I think he ultimately was successful. It depends on how you define success. I think he was, first of all, successful because he made beautiful products that he put his heart and his soul and everything that he had learned into, whether it was textiles, whether it was wine, whether it was a golf club, whether it was the Bobby Jones instructional tapes that he had seen as a boy in the movie theaters and found 50 years later, and Callaway Golf re-released those instructional tapes.
Yes, so, and I have those also.
Yes, indeed.
And where was it he found them? He told me the story once and then said, and we didn't find them in a vault in wherever. We actually found them in. Do you remember where he found them?
I don't remember exactly, but I do know that he was like an archaeologist. So
he was. He had people looking all over. I mean, it's someplace crazy like Kansas City or something.
Yeah. Oh, they were in Warner Brothers archives, but not where they should have been.
Okay.
So yes, he knew that they exist. He became a sleuth, and he was determined to find them.
It took him years to find those
because of Bobby Jones being his hero and him having remembered. That's how he learned to play golf. Was those instructional films in the movie theater, and he became a teen champion. And but anyway, I just wanted to say, Gary, that success, I think, is first of all, success is making what you love and putting all of yourself into it. In that sense, he was hugely successful.
Yes.
Financially, sort of the biography, you would think that he just had the Midas touch. But one of the things that the book demonstrates that is so valuable is it was throughout his life. It was very often on a whim and a prayer, and it was so hairy, and he was on the edge, and he risked everything. You know, Callaway Golf was a 10-year overnight sensation, and he was in his early 70s.
Yeah. Well, he started with the hickory sticks, and then from that fooled around with some other hickory clad clubs, and I don't think the ones I have ever went into production.
I think that's interesting. That may be a prototype that was.
Yeah, I think they were prototypes.
Or there might have been a handful of them. Yeah, so they started in the persimmon era, and the hickory and persimmon era. But what a.
And then he went to Big Bertha, and he changed the way golf was played, because that was the first really big driver, if I recall correctly. Is that right? That's what I recall, Gary. How about you?
Well, it was one of certainly, it might have been the first. I don't know. Big is a relative term anymore. They don't look big anymore, but
it was
the driver to have at that moment. Yeah. There was nothing like it. And part of its allure, besides the fact that it did indeed go farther, it made this loud crack. And I'm convinced that a big part of its appeal was the noise. Even if you didn't hit it farther, it sounded like you killed it every time. And I don't know if golfers realized that at the time, but you hit it and it sounded great, even if it didn't go great. So, you know, hearing is believing. So it was
Right.
it was a great combination, but it did, in fact, it did produce results. But I think the seniors who hit it probably didn't hit it much farther, but that sound just was so satisfying. It's kind of like why I always love bowling. The sound of those pins crashing, you're like hitting something. It's a great way to vent frustration. I love
You're
that.
absolutely right, Gary.
That was the
He
Big Bertha was the bowling pins flying an impact. It was great.
and that's an unforgettable sound. The impact of the Big Bertha club head on the ball was unforgettable. It became a new multi-sensory experience. And
Well, you're right. You're right about everything Dutch didn't turn to gold, because he did have the foray into, decided to make the golf balls, and that was that as I recall, it kind of brought the company down, and I don't know how much trouble it caused, but it was not that was a long-term play, and boy, in the short term, that was a loser for a while.
it was very capital intensive. I believe over $200 million.
Yeah.
To build a golf ball plant. I remember
He
very
probably, well, if he could have done it over after looking at it, even though the ball is successful today, he probably would have said this isn't worth it. But it seemed like a good idea at the time, and everything else Callaway did work, and the ball did eventually. It's got its niche in the marketplace now, but boy, it took a long time.
It sure did. But he had the long view. He was willing to risk, the success of the clubs yet it was all about innovation, and it was all about creating an experience that was, as he called it, pleasing, demonstrably superior and pleasingly different. And that was the reason that what you described were all the qualities of the Big Bertha, but it was ultimately, I think his goal was to bring the unforgettable experience of a well-hit shot to the average golfer by making it easier with a larger club head and therefore larger sweet spot. And he cared about enhancing the enjoyment of a lifestyle experience to the largest audience. And in that sense, he was a kind of avatar of late 20th century lifestyle brand creators, along with, it's on a bigger scale, but I think there's a lot of similarities between what he did in the realm of golf and what Steve Jobs did, in the realm of in the realm of computers and devices, handheld devices. It's a very rare thing. I think if you look at the history of American business or business in general, to create a brand, to create a lifestyle brand, to create a lifestyle brand that creates a community and of passionately devoted customers, that's magic. That rarely happens. And those who know and love their clubs, that's what they feel. It's more than just an object. It's something that enhances your life and your pleasure of life.
There aren't a lot of clubs that people fall in love with, or there are special clubs along the way, and everybody has one or two in their lives. But the Big Bertha certainly was one of those clubs that it was more than a golf club. That people, I don't even know how to explain it, but you had a special attachment to that club because it was one of a kind, at the time.
And I think it was people identified with it and again, it's because golf is not just an activity. And golf is a lifestyle. Golf is a culture. Golf is a community. Those are the deeper aspects. And golf is perhaps almost unique in that regard as a participatory lifestyle. And he understood that because he had spent his life practicing, understanding the technique, but also the spirit of the game, the culture of the game. And that's, I think that's part of what made that profound attachment that millions of people did and do still feel with their Callaway clubs.
Well, there's an interesting difference because he was in the San Diego portion of Southern California, and there were a lot of people that came out of aircraft manufacturing in Southern California, and they brought all of the titaniums and this, that, all the rare and exotic metals that all of a sudden started showing up in clubs when we left the era of persimmon. But Ely kind of brought romance, you know. I mean, he had metals, but it was kind of a romance.
Well, he was an expert on that.
Huh?
He was an expert on romance,
yeah.
Which is not in the book, but that's good.
Well, we only allude to it, but I do say in my introduction he was a helpless romantic, and I mean helpless.
Yeah. Look, hey, we're gonna run out of time before we cover anything, but we got to talk first briefly about the whole. You can't explain the whole process, but I told you pissed me off because I'm going to have to buy the book twice, the print version and the audio version, because the audio version, with the help of AI and 2 voice actors and modern technology, the book, Ely Callaway sounds like he's reading it to you, the audio book, and you played me some clips, and it's spooky. It's spooky good. Just tell us the short version of how that happened. You recorded a lot of it in the Ukraine. I mean, it's but we still have to get to the Manila folder. So tell us the short version of the AI book and how that came about.
Sure. Well, we do hope you will find that both the print book and the audio book are demonstrably superior and pleasingly different, and that it's therefore worth the price, Gary. But yes, they are separate. The book is $40 jacketed hard copy retail. It's going to sell out, so we're going to have multiple printings. But if you want your first edition copy, go to pre-order on Amazon, please, or bn.com. Anyway. Ely was a great storyteller. What I heard all my life was this amazing voice that was a reflection of a culture, of a region, early 20th century, deep South. He was a Southern gentleman, and everything was a story. And I think everyone who knew him would say the same thing. That's what I hear again and again. So when we were putting together the book, I kept hearing his voice, and we wanted the book to sound in the written word as if you were at dinner with Ely and he was telling you a story, because that's what I remembered. And that gave me the idea, oh my gosh, what if we could bring him to life in that unique, in that inimitable voice? The technology was not there, and that led us on a 2-year project on the leading edge, sometimes the bleeding edge of technology. And I said, I knew it would be possible. It was when AI was just gathering steam, and I didn't know how we would do it, but I thought, I don't want to do this unless and until in the audio version, if I could not tell the difference. This voice that I heard as the first voice for 48 years. And it was very unusual. We essentially assembled a studio of creative human talent, hours of historical recordings of his real voice, a voice actor named Vince Marcus, who is an extraordinary mimic. Fred Newman, also a renowned voice actor from Prairie Home Companion, who was born in LaGrange, who I had known for 40 years, and I called him up. I played Ely's voice, and he was silent. And Gary, you tell this story, and he said, these are the voices that I heard as a child. And
Now, you mean LaGrange, Georgia, for anybody?
LaGrange, Georgia, excuse me. Yes, LaGrange, Georgia. And people don't, he said, that accent is disappearing with every subsequent generation. So we worked for the last 2 years, and about 3 months ago, we got to the point, the studio is the world's leading text-to-speech and speech-to-speech voice cloning studio. They're doing a lot with Hollywood over the last 10 years. They are in Kyiv, Ukraine. It's an extraordinary group of technologists, artists, I call them. They have 4 Oscar nominations for films this year. They are on the leading edge. And they said our technique doesn't eliminate the human element. You need the actor who will mimic the performative aspects that makes everyone's voice unique in terms of rhythm, cadence, pitch, pauses. Ely was a master of the pause. So
almost like a preacher.
Well, that's a very, I think, very insightful comment, Kathy, because he was very proud that he came from a line of 35 Baptist preachers. And Fred confirmed that this is very much in the Southern Baptist preacher tradition.
A preacher is
in other words, this book is an act of American cultural preservation, as well as, a story. So this was an amazing team, and after about the 15th iteration, the ensemble came through, the recording came through, and I went, "Oh my Lord, I can't tell the difference."
It makes me want to hear his version first.
Yeah,
I feel like if I read the book first, it's gonna spoil me. I want to hear it. I mean,
I think you're right, because when we read, excuse me for interrupting. You're right, because when we read, we create the voice in our head first. So anyway, we are debuting it along with the print book. He's coming back after a generation to tell his story in words, and he's telling his story in his own voice.
And this is a publishing first, correct? This audio?
Yes, there are AI audiobooks, but no one has used this technique that marries live actor with historical recording with AI, and you have to buy the book in order to get the audiobook. We have another innovation, a QR code that will take you to a free sample and then to a link to buy it. It's $24.95. We may roll it out after a month, but we want to tie together reading experience and the listening experience. So that's why we're doing that.
Okay, well, before we all turn into pumpkins, let's go to the manila envelope.
Yes, this is incredible. The last, and it's got to be short, but it's when you told me this earlier, I was astounded. It's like a scene from a murder mystery novel where we found an envelope and it says to be opened only after my death. It's like, what?
When I decided to take the pieces of the puzzle and complete it, I spent a year researching in the archives I inherited from him, tens of thousands of documents. And I learned things that even I didn't know. But then at the end of it, there was a manila envelope. And late one Saturday night, it almost as if it jumped up to say, "Take me." And on the outside, it says, "Do not open until..."
Is this the actual? Do you have the actual envelope?
There is the envelope.
Oh my gosh!
And in it,
that's history.
In it was 175 pages in his own hand and memos that tells a story he never could tell during his lifetime, but that is the missing piece when he was truly tested in midlife and faced utter ruin in all ways. And
Yeah.
what he decided to do both was the right thing, and it defined him. It involved giving up everything that he had worked for and aimed for and starting over in California. But if he had not done that, we would never have Ely Callaway, the entrepreneur, maker of wine, of golf clubs. That's the story that is told in chapter 4. It's called The Madison Matter, and it's for anyone and everyone, because even Larry Dorman, who worked with him, as soon as I found this and I unsealed it, I called Larry and I said, do you know about the Madison Matter? And he said, oh my gosh, I have a vague memory of Ely saying to me, Larry, do you know what a consent decree is? And Larry said, not really. He said, well, it's the most important story. It's going to be in the book. Now, this was in the 1990s. So when I read the transcript of that, which I found, I knew that Ely was giving me permission to tell that story. So,
and this story is about a corporate scandal while he was at, or
Burlington
started before he was at Burlington Industries, but
yeah.
And he didn't know anything about it.
He didn't know anything about it, and he found out about it, and he wanted to do the right thing, but the corporation was not interested in doing the right thing. So it's pretty gutsy, pretty incredible thing. And as you and I said, you told me earlier, Nicholas, that if that hadn't happened, it wouldn't have led him eventually to move to California, start the winery, which then led him to Callaway Golf and the most important thing, golf history. So it's funny how dominoes fall.
Well, it is a great example. It's one reason the book is for everybody, because it's a very inspiring life story about facing crisis, about taking leaps into the unknown, out of crisis when you cannot see into the future, and the rewards that can come from having the ethics, the morality to do the right thing, and then to be willing to stake everything on that belief.
I feel like there should be an Ely Callaway museum with all these artifacts in it now.
Well, there are archives, but we're working on a place. We are also working on a limited TV series and a feature film, because this is the outer story, which involves a lot of deep personal things, but the personal life we left out for the most part, and it is so dramatic and entertaining that it will make a great TV series.
Oh, I bet it would. Just as Time in Golf would make a great TV series.
Absolutely. Sure. You know what? This morning, and after reading your piece, Gary, I realized, we wanted this to be for a general audience, equally for the business world, the golf world, and just inspiring life story. But we're going to do a second volume, and we're going to call it Ely Golf. And it's going to be the deep dive into a lifetime of playing and changing and reinventing the game of golf. It's about all
nerds, for those golf nerds like us.
Exactly.
He actually had.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first. I just came up with the idea.
When you said Ely Golf, he used to do something like, because of his age or whatever, he used to if he was in a bad spot on the golf course, he'd just move it. It's kind of like Willie Nelson rules.
No, he called it. He said, I play Ely Golf. He said, I don't keep score, and if you hit a bad shot, don't worry. Just drop another. He always had a pocket full of balls.
Hit
another one.
Yep.
He never got mad. He never got frustrated. He never blamed the caddy. He was in the moment. It was pure. It was the pure experience of the beauty of the game.
Well, he and my mother and dad certainly had fun on that round of golf that we played.
I wish I had been. I wish I could have been there.
Well, it's going to be a blockbuster book. The audio version is going to be blockbuster. There's a lot of actual important golf history in here. So anybody out there there's one book you got to get this year, and this is going to be it. There's going to be a lot of people getting a certain book for Father's Day, I suspect.
Well, it is a father-son project. It's a father-son story. It has that element, of course. And yes, we all know someone in our family. There was a father, a son, who loves the game and would love the book. So yeah, we think it's going to be big on launch and just continue to grow over Father's Day through the season and into the holidays.